Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine Podcast Radio. You're about to listen to a new Redefining Technology podcast. Standing on 2 feet, having dexterous hands, developing a language that allows us to communicate, and the ability to understand abstract concepts. These are all part of the equation of humanity. Still, it is the capacity to create tools and advance the technology that has allowed us to thrive on this planet, and maybe on others. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Devo unlocks the full value of machine data for the world's most instrumented enterprises. The Devo Data Analytics Platform addresses the explosion in volume of machine data and the crushing demands of algorithms and automation. Learn more at devo.com.
CrowdSec, the collaborative and open source cybersecurity solution. Analyze behaviors, respond to attacks, and share signals across the community for free. Let's make the internet safer together. Learn more at crowdsec.net.
Marco.
Sean.
You know, it's the time to buy stuff.
Oh yeah, gizmos, like gadgets.
All the blinking, flashing light things, and I'm sure I think everything these days has technology in it. Toys, music.
Everything has artificial intelligence. That's the last thing I heard.
But my point is, it seems you can't get away, and I don't want to get away from it, but technology is everywhere, and we've yet to see all the cool things that are heading our way as humans. And there's a place that does a great job of pulling all the latest innovations and all the latest entrepreneurs and the latest bits and bytes and gadgets coming to market soon. Some in market, some coming to market from all around the world. And that's CES in Las Vegas, an annual event. And I'm thrilled to have Brian Markwalter on. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
And you're the SVP of Research and Standards at Consumer Technology Association, which I believe is the organizer of the event. And we'll probably touch on that a little bit, but perhaps a few words about who Brian is, your role with CTA and CES, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again for having me. Yes, you are correct. I work for CTA, Consumer Technology Association, and we own and produce CES. I think many people know us because of CES more so than the trade association itself, and unless you're in the industry, you know what we do there. So I've had the privilege of working for CTA for many years now, more than 20. And I kind of run 2 groups. I have a fun job. I get to do our market research. So one of the things that CTA does is handle all our data and forecasting, business intelligence, consumer research on behalf of the industry. So I oversee that part. And I'm an engineer by background, and I run our technology and standards group. So for those who are familiar with things like IEEE 802.11, or maybe what they probably might know that comes from us is a standard that underlies HDMI comes from CTA. So engineers in the background work on figuring out all these interoperability things and write them down, and that's part of what we do.
Well, I'm going to stop Sean before he goes into...
I'm already going there.
Okay.
I'm going to stop you. I'm going to let you go after that. But what I would like to do is to, you presented, Sean, very, very well, the CES, and I'm sure a lot of people know what it is, but also I think a lot of people use and look forward for all the things that are presented there, but maybe they don't know exactly what CES is. So Brian, a little introduction, how long has this event been going on, and how it's evolved through the year to arrive to 2023?
Yes, actually has a long history back to the late 60s. We've been, and the show was in two locations for a while, but for many, many years now, it's been in January in Las Vegas, and I think that's what people really now know, because it's been a couple of decades that it's been there. And so it ended up there in January because that fit the industry schedule. It's been, I think, fortuitous, because everybody's ready to come to Vegas and sort of lay out the technology calendar for the year, if you will. I mean, it just turns out that the timing's right. We're a little bit past the crazy holiday season. So, of course, the consumer electronics industry, like others, holiday selling season is busy. And then we jump back in January and set the stage for all the technology introductions for the coming year in Las Vegas. So it's a big industry. It is a trade event. It is an industry event. It's not a consumer show. But basically, the things you guys were talking about at the beginning, technology is so pervasive. The term that we started using, and actually others use, is that every company is a tech company now. That's why we see such a huge variety of companies at CES, including ones you wouldn't expect, which is part of what makes it fun.
Yeah, and it's almost like you can't have a product that doesn't have tech in it. So to your point, every company is a tech company. So speaking of that message, what's the message or the theme for this year's show, and how did you arrive at that theme?
Yeah. So the industry, we get asked that a lot, and there's, it's kind of too big, so to speak, to have one theme, but there's definitely certain things that show up. For sure, there's a lot of momentum in the industry right now, momentum in the show. So we have one digital version of CES in 2021. We were back at the beginning of this year. So January 22, we came back. We've had phenomenal growth. It's clear everybody is ready to get together and be in person, because there's some experiences that you just you need to be there for. So we are at about 2.1 million, a little over 2.1 million net square feet of exhibit space, 2,800 exhibitors, and we're aiming for and on track for about 100,000 attendees. So we expect it to be a really robust show, and I'm sure you're starting to see a little bit of news about it already. And then, as you noted, a lot of companies kind of keep their powder dry, and then you'll see a flurry of announcements as we hit the press days right before the show opens.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen the action, not just because we are in the industry, so we get all the pitch, and we kind of like have to say, oh, look what's coming up. It's kind of like pre-Christmas, opening the gift way before.
That's
but
right.
One thing that Sean and I did on our own conversation to kick off the coverage, we were going through all the topics, and we were like, oh wow, there is this as well. There is food technology, there is Web3 and metaverse, of course. There is a lot of things like smart cities that people expect, but there is also like marketing and advertising, which is kind of like what you said. Every company at this point is a technology company. So the big question for me is, how do you guys organize all of these, that there is this synergy then that comes together? What's the secret sauce there?
Yeah. So the C space, you covered a lot there. There's a couple of different aspects of it. One's for attendees, maybe some advice for attendees, but how we organize it. So the show is spread over multiple venues. We have some great resources. Maybe I should start with this. So on our website, which is maybe where you did some of your research, ces.tech, there's some great resources, because there's hundreds of conference speakers. There's really deep content that people can get to at our conferences. And then there's the physical venues where exhibits and meeting spaces are. So we use the LVCC, the convention center itself. We use the Venetian, and we use ARIA and the space for what you noted about the advertising world. We call that area, we call it C space. And so it's got kind of its own clientele and is a little bit separated. And perhaps it's worth a little story about that. One thing we learned over the years as the show progressed, we knew, more than 100,000 people come to the show, and we know it's all kinds of people. And we knew we know a lot of meetings take place. So one of the efficiencies is that people are hosting dozens of meetings while they're there. We were aware that the advertising and kind of CMOs of the world, that side of the business, which I guess we would not necessarily think of as kind of core CES business, were in attendance. And kind of word got back, well, we were all running around trying to meet each other. And so the best thing for us to do, the best service we could provide was, let's give a venue, a place for them to kind of come together. And so that's how C-Space was born. Little different, but very neat. So if you're in that part of the world, that's where you want to be.
You know what I'm excited for, Brian? I'm excited for the drone to drop a yacht into Lake Mead out there. To offload my autonomous vehicle that inside has my robot. So,
all right.
So I'm excited to see that happen. You're going to make that happen for me, right?
Yeah. You'll see, well, oddly enough, you'll probably see all those parts, just maybe not at Lake Mead. But we'll have eVTOLs, the electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft will be there, and robots and everything.
But in the metaverse, Brian, everything is possible.
Everything's possible. That's right.
So one of the things, and I forgot to say that the drone was coming from outer space, because I think I read that there's a live stream of the International Space Station going on as well. Is that something you guys help organize?
Yeah. So it's actually linked to our conference session, and I've mentioned I've been doing this a long time. I'm still kind of blown away at times at the things, that the creative ideas that people have for tying in technology. Some space related technologies have shown up for a few of our shows now. Not sort of related to, not really to space tourism, but there's a lot going on in the space world. Starlink, low Earth orbit satellites, and other stuff. But in any case, so yes, part of our conference session literally is participants from the space station. So that will be cool, and I'm sure a lot of people will working hard in the background to make all that come together. But I feel certain it's our first panel participant from space.
Well, it's a good first thing, I love
yes.
it. I'm a big space geek myself, so that's really cool. You know what? You said something, you and Sean, and we haven't even touched the metaverse and all the virtual world. And you said you really need to be there to demo this stuff, to really see it in person. We're always doing cybersecurity conference, but really there is not much to touch. You can see a bunch of demo, but it's like, a dashboard or something like that. There, you don't get to probably break stuff, I'm sure, which Sean would love to do, but you get to experience it in person. And I'm wondering if you can take a little walk back in memory lane here. You say you've been doing it for a long time, and what was at the beginning, or at least maybe 20 years ago, what people would have expect going there? Definitely not connecting with the International Space Station or drones, but what was the technology back then and the technology now? Because if I think about it, it blows my mind.
Yeah, so there's lots and we used to keep track of product introductions, and we do keep track, a lot of lots of startups, on the order of 1,000 startups. We probably have the biggest startup event, I suspect, in the nation, kind of accidentally at CES. I'll talk about Eureka Park in a little bit, perhaps, for those who are very more interested in emerging tech and startups. But so 20 years ago, we were coming off .com. For those who go back a little ways, it had been a big bubble and downfall after that. But what we've seen, it's an interesting question you ask, because it makes me think about kind of where we are in this moment in time. But a lot of times technology leads. We find that coming out of economic downturns that technology will often lead. There, you get sort of, people talk about like tech introductions being not linear. They sort of bunch up and you get a big progression of technology. So I think we're seeing a lot of things come together now. We're seeing people experiment with the metaverse. Back then, that time frame, there's still very much, people have always pursued immersive experiences. And so I think if I look over my career, that has always been an element. If you've navigated at CES before, the Las Vegas Convention Center's what they call Central Hall, the main one that's right there in the middle, that's where the biggest brands and a lot of the entertainment and video is typically located. So that's where you would go see, first introduction of 4K TVs and 8K TVs and immersive audio. And so I think that's been a constant element, is how do we have the most entertaining experiences and immersive experiences. So that's always been true. It's just been different technologies over time.
That's interesting. I just did a quick search. I don't know how accurate the site is, but it pulled up Blu-ray was released in 2003, and MySpace was founded in 2003.
Sounds right. So
that gives us a kind of a view, right?
Yes. Yeah. So Blu-ray, I'm sure, when it happened, you would have seen it at CES, definitely.
Yep.
It's incredible.
So what are there? And I don't want to just focus on the show floor, because I think there are a lot of, you mentioned the panel, right? Connected to space, but that's just one of many, many, many conversations that are taking place. Are there any that stand out to you, especially as a researcher, kind of, are there interesting things coming that we can't show yet, but we're ready to start talking about?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of ways to look at that. One easy way to look at probably the biggest movers in the industry would be to look at our keynotes. So we have very high level people, and they are typically kind of painting a vision for where they're going. So those are to your point, Sean, a little bit more forward looking and a vision. So we have John Deere's CEO, John May, is speaking, and you might think, what the heck is a tractor company doing at CES? To our point, that every company is a tech company, but their vision is how are we going to feed the size of our global population? So they're very keen on the introduction of technology for the agriculture and food technology business. AMD, Dr. Lisa Su is going to be talking about their computing platforms and how they're used to address some of these big problems. BMW, Oliver Zitsu will be speaking. Let me see who else. Stellantis, Carlos Tavares is also giving a keynote. So you'll see all that. Kind of over on the C-Space side that we talked about, that kind of marketing approach. Ed Bastian, the Delta Airlines CEO, is going to be talking over there about experiences and how they engage customers. So there's a lot for everybody to learn. That's kind of top tier. Get a feel for that. And if you can just go on our website, and there's a easily searchable, just depending on what your topic is, you can search by speakers or by topics. It's really easy to find stuff. I'll put in one plug, because you mentioned research. My team does what we call Research Summit, which is a track that is dedicated to kind of market research topics, and it really is about innovative. We put together little panels all day long, so it's that's a bunch going on there. A lot of different categories.
And I know, Marco, you want to jump in, but
go.
just quickly, I'm wondering how much, because you said it's an industry event, right? And I'm wondering how much these forward-looking and these releases and launches and demonstrations and conversations aren't just about the people that are presenting, but about the broader impact. Because as you're talking about BMW, and as you're talking about John Deere as a tractor company, they're all using all kinds of things, right? I can only imagine John Deere is leveraging satellites to help guide their tractors and
definitely.
and looking at weather information to determine when it's best to start harvesting. Autonomous vehicles, we can look at some of the same technologies. My point is, there are companies that build stuff, use other elements, and that just spawns a ton of things. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that and how CES kind of helps drive some of
Yeah.
that.
So you hit on something that we think is very important, and why people come back, and why we expect to get 100,000 attendees is there's a term we talk about internally, the serendipity of CES. So part of what's important, and I know a lot of companies are doing, is, of course, they have their own message, whether that's more like a vision of where we're going as a company. And combined with that, even the biggest companies are painting vision, or often they're also doing their own press conferences where they're having their product rollouts, so very much like, here's what we're going to be offering this year. But those same companies are walking around the floor figuring out, and this, putting ideas together of like, oh, why is this company here, and how can I use this technology? So we know a lot of partnerships come out of it. And I'll take a moment, because I mentioned Eureka Park. So that's our startup area, and I have to think how old it is now. But we, years ago, we thought, we should help startups get on the floor, because there wasn't a dedicated area for them. And we knew we had board members who started literally, as tiny companies, barely. We have one former chairman of our board many years ago. I mean, literally, they got in their car, drove their stuff to Las Vegas, and showed it, and got their business going like many startups did. So we dedicated this area called Eureka Park to startups, and it's just gone, gangbusters. It's on the order of 1,000 companies there. So for those, and we know, because we get a lot of feedback from our board members and people who might not necessarily expect to go spend a bunch of time rummaging around startups, but we know it's a really popular area, and people are using that to just go through and think, like, wow, what's happening here? What are all these new small companies doing to create new technologies? So that's a good way to go experience the whole gamut of new tech.
Yeah, let me ask you something, because of course this is a global event. So I'm sure in another country there is a smaller conference and congress and stuff like that. But when you think about the big stage, that's it, right? So I'm wondering, how do you select and work with other country? I mean, I know we have got invitation to discuss with the Swiss Chamber of Commerce or with the Belgium one or others. What is the space given to them, and how it's decided who gets to the Eureka Park, or who gets a primary space, like the selection in a way, and the way that you interact with the global community?
Sure. Yeah, so it's interesting. One of the things we did not expect when we started Eureka Park, because that's where we do see a lot of country presence, and maybe that's part of what you're referring to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When we started Eureka Park, we figured, so we'll get some startups from around the U.S. It'll be fun and cool. Our target was like, 50 companies, which we thought would be a great start. What we didn't anticipate was that countries, in hindsight, this makes total sense, but countries want to show the innovation in their own economy. And so the countries, so rather than these startups having to sort of do their own thing, they kind of group together and bring their startups in. So, we just taught them they're an exhibitor to us, so everybody has a fair shot at getting in, as long as it's a technology that's appropriate for CES. And we have some countries who are very organized and very committed to bringing delegations. France has brought a bunch. Netherlands been very keen to do this. We even have, some companies have either incubators or partnerships So we occasionally see a company will kind of bring some of their partners that they're working with, that they're trying to incubate and get into Eureka Park. Yeah, so that's it. And in general, countries take different approaches. There are some groups that will kind of help others. They're like aggregators that will help companies get together and get to the show floor, help them navigate getting on the show floor.
Nice. And I want to talk, and I've held off for 24 minutes. Marco got in front of me. I'm going to go back to the standards, and I know some of the events and conferences we go to, they've recently done a pretty good job of pulling folks from government and policymakers and researchers like yourself from like IEEE to really take a look at, all right, so it's not just one company building something proprietary. There's a technology that's being used, and there may be 2 or 3 players in this space, and it can have a pretty significant impact on humanity if we don't kind of understand how it works, why it works, what are some of the risks, where might ethical and moral lines be blurred if this technology is misused. So I don't know if you can share how the audience or the attendees and perhaps the speakers and the rest of the crew come together to look at standards and policies and laws. And again, back to the global arena, how do we look at this where some countries have different ideas around security and privacy, right? China versus the US as one example. So I don't know, a big bucket there, but just some of your thoughts on some of that stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I'll separate things a little bit. There's the policy part, and let me address it first because policy topics are big at CES. We have a whole track of our conference sessions is dedicated to policy discussions. We have FCC. Actually, I think we just announced that. Energy Secretary will be at CES, and we typically get FCC commissioners and others. So plus, not to mention delegations from other countries, but just looking at U.S. delegations that'll be there. So our innovation policy summit. So if you can search on those. We invite them in. We have conversations with high-level government people where. Its conversations are about some of the same things you're talking about, which is where are you going? What's happening here? What's the industry doing versus what the regulators are doing? So we're happy to engage those conversations at CES. So they're typically along some sort of topic. I'll give you a couple of examples. Like I know we don't necessarily want to drill down on cybersecurity, but CEAPmagazine, who works for NIST, she's part of their IoT. She's a cybersecurity program manager. She'll be at the show talking about the state of IoT cybersecurity. So that's not uncommon for government guests to be part of our conference sessions in different formats, either fireside chats or other ways to talk about some of these hard questions we're all wrestling with.
Well, it all comes together, right? As we started our magazine talking about cybersecurity and society, and then we put technology in, and it's always either 2 or all 3 of them together in conversation. Yeah. So yeah. I'm glad that Sean brought it back there. I knew he was going to do it. And I'm going to dig a little bit deeper in that as we start wrapping here, because I see that there is a section on the website where you actually do present the topic of technology having a critical role in human security. And we talk about privacy, freedom, environmental protection. So I'm thinking, let me put it into tech for good. You can still make money, you can still sell product, but why not do it with an eye on the environment, the population? Because at the end of the day, why are we developing technology? Which is kind of like the core of Redefining Technology, which is our channel here. Let's do something that is useful for ourselves. So if you can tell me about that approach, in the conversation. I don't know if, and I'm going back to cybersecurity, like, events like that 15 years ago, we weren't talking about the human element. Now it's all about the human element,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm imagining even more when you're talking consumers, even if it's an industry event, what has been the evolution there, and where are we going with this?
Yeah, so I'm really glad you asked, because this is brand new at CES this year. There's been a theme of tech for good. We've advocated for it, and I think a lot of the companies in their keynotes and in their exhibits have tried to show what they're doing to serve positively with their products and services that they're offering. But this year, for the first time, we are partnering with the United Nations Trust Fund for Human Security and the World Academy of Art and Science. So they've framed out these human securities. We might, sort of think of them like rights, so to speak. There's kind of maybe not a perfect word, but you would get the point, which is access to health care, personal income, the right to be able to work and get paid, environmental security, personal security, community. And so those themes, when they came to us, we thought, that fits very much what we see at CES. So it was natural for us to partner with them. You'll see a lot of that at CES. And then the companies themselves, there's no mandate. There's just here's this framework. You can, the companies can talk about how what they're doing fits within this framework. And I think a lot will be talking about the relationship of their products. I mean, you think about it, like, the thing we've already mentioned, John Deere, they're very much interested in making sure that one of the basic human needs is met, which is that people, can get access to food.
Yeah, I love it, Brian. And we covered quite a bit in this short conversation that hopefully kind of sets the stage for everybody. Certainly helps set the stage for us for all of the coverage we're planning to do. We're gonna chat with speakers and presenters and panelists and exhibitors and researchers and policymakers, regulators, whoever we can get our mics in front of. And we're excited to do that with all things going on for the week at CES. I wanted to give you an opportunity. I don't know if there's something we didn't touch on that you wanted to mention before we wrap.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, I hope you guys can make it in person. We have more than 4,000 media already registered, so we expect to have very strong press presence. I mentioned we're hoping to get 100,000 people. On track to do that. We expect about 1/3 of those from outside the U.S., which I think is very cool. That people are committed to coming together for this. And we'll be releasing, so there's a digital component for those who can't make it in person. Sorry, it's such a wonderful in-person experience. If you can't, we will have kind of a digital venue that people can access. So there'll be more news on that, including our app that attendees and people who cannot attend will be able to use. But there'll be content that people can get to through the digital venue.
Nice. And for everybody listening, we'll be sure to include links, obviously, to ces.tech and links to folks to register with, so they can actually attend and join us. I'm excited to let's just say it, be in it, Brian. And,
yes.
And to have all these conversations. It's great to see the innovation. It's great to see the work the industry is doing to help move technology forward, hopefully in a positive way. And I'm thrilled to have as many conversations as we can as part of our Redefining Technology show here on ITSP Magazine.
Yeah, and I sure appreciate, for my final thought, that even if we're going back to in-person event, of course, our a bigger experience to be there, giving the opportunity to those that cannot travel to Las Vegas and to stay up to date with what's happening and be part of it in a virtual way, much cheaper, I'm sure, but also giving knowledge to everyone. So I love personally this hybrid, carry on the hybrid event, and I hope it lasts with that. That said, we're looking forward to come there and touch stuff. So
That's right.
All right.
I love it. All right, well, everybody stay tuned for more coverage here. And Brian, thank you very much for taking the time to share with us today some of the highlights from CES 2023. It's just around the corner, so hopefully we'll see you and everybody else there.
All right. Thank you, Sean and Marco.
thank you.
CrowdSec, the collaborative and open source cybersecurity solution. Analyze behaviors, respond to attacks, and share signals across the community for free. Let's make the internet safer together. Learn more at crowdsec.net.
Devo unlocks the full value of machine data for the world's most instrumented enterprises. The Devo Data Analytics Platform addresses the explosion in volume of machine data and the crushing demands of algorithms and automation. Learn more at devo.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Technology Podcast. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share ITSPmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.